Do you need help deciding which running backs to start or sit in Week 13 of the fantasy football season? Well, stick around and we'll tell you. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Kier. He's Chris. We're here to help you with those tough lineup decisions at the running back position. This time, Week 13 of the season. We got two teams that are on bye. That's the Cardinals and the Panthers. So before we get into the matchups, again, we go game by game with all the running backs that might have fantasy relevance. But these running backs, you really don't have to worry about. They are must start no matter what. Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, aka him, Christian McCaffrey, Kenneth Walker, Dalvin Cook, Travis Etienne, and Joe Mixon if he plays. All right, first up this week, Thursday night, we have the Bills at the Patriots. Second straight week that the Buffalo Bills have the first matchup of the week. So it's still Devin Singletary. He's the lead back. Didn't score last week. He's still the main guy there. How do you feel about him against this really, really tough New England run defense?
Not as good as I felt last week. Singletary, one of those guys, especially in a tough matchup like this. I'm not going to say you have to sit him, but he's one of those guys, don't have to start him, but if you need him, you can start him, but nothing more than that.
Yeah, definitely riskier this week. Again, we were out on Dalvin Cook last week because he faced the Patriots, and that turned out to be the right call. You can't feel great about Devin Singletary, but again, even though there's only two teams that are out of action this weekend, you might not have better options. You can flex him. You can throw him in there if you're hurting at RB2, but I would try not to if you can help it. So I'm going to guess that means you can't feel too much better about James Cook, who has been a little bit involved lately, but probably not enough to be in fantasy lineups.
Yeah, and in a tough matchup, I like that he's getting more involved, but it's not enough to be in fantasy lineups in a tough matchup, not starting James Cook.
Yeah, and it's funny because not because Nyheim Hines has been involved, he hasn't. He's strictly a special teamer for some reason. I would like to see James Cook catching more passes. It's just not happening yet, so you cannot start him right now. And then on the Patriots side, you already liked Ramondre Stevenson. You got to love him this week, even though the matchup doesn't look great, because Damien Harris has been ruled out, not going to play. It's all Ramondre. Is he a must start?
Yeah, I think he is. It's not the best matchup, but the thing about Ramondre is he's catching so many passes, it almost doesn't matter. So, he might not have the highest of ceilings in this matchup, but still, I think he has a very high floor. You've got to start him.
That's the thing is we can't quite put him in that upper echelon, those top 12 running backs, the guys we already mentioned, but he's really close. He's high end of an RB2 as you can get. I think you have to start him this week. Steelers at the Falcons. Cordell Patterson, kind of in a timeshare with Tyler Algier. So let's start with Patterson. If he's not scoring touchdowns, what is his value?
Not a whole lot. And look, the Steelers with TJ Watt, they're a better defense than they were, the first however many games without him, where they were really bad defense. So in this matchup, completely touchdown dependent, I'm going to say no to Cordell Patterson.
Yeah, honestly, I just can't have that much interest because he doesn't bring you that floor, which is odd for someone who's a converted wide receiver because he's not catching passes. He's getting at most 12 carries pretty much. Desperation start only. And then Tyler Algier, who kind of has looked better than Patterson, these days, got a little bit more burst, but same thing. To me, he's just a flex if you really have to.
Yeah, not even that high for me in this matchup. I'm sitting Algier as well.
Broncos taking on the Ravens in Baltimore. It is all Latavius Murray. And look, he had his moments. If there's one positive thing about this Denver offense, it was Latavius Murray last week. So how do you feel about him this week?
He's okay. And I'm never going to say you have to start Latavius Murray, but it's not the worst matchup. If you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, exactly. Look, if you picked up Latavius Murray, hopefully it wasn't as a starter because, you would have to be really hurting. Injuries happen, but still, hopefully he's your RB3 or 4 at best. So if you need him, go ahead. But again, there's other guys with more upside. And then on the Ravens side, is it just all Gus Edwards again? As soon as he's back from injury, he's getting almost all the carries. Kenny Drake only saw 2 carries. I don't even think we need to talk about him. So what about Gus against Denver?
Yeah, he's the guy. He's getting all the work. But last week was Jacksonville. This is Denver. And I know Denver's defense, like the whole Denver team is, on a terrible spiral right now. But still, this isn't as good a matchup as last week. Probably needs to score to do anything. But he is getting the volume. He does have chances to score in this offense. So again, I'll just say if you need him, you can start him. But that's as high as I can go.
Yeah, you can't ever go crazy with any Baltimore running back because, again, the lead rusher there is always going to be Lamar Jackson. Look, they're at home against a team that basically now might have a lame duck coach. Reportedly, Hackett's getting fired at the end of the year. I don't know what they're waiting for, but look, Gus Edwards is kind of Latavius Murray, just on a slightly better team. So, high-end RB3, but yeah, that's as high as I'll go. Packers at the Bears. The real intrigue is who's going to be quarterback for the Packers, but let's talk about the running game first. Aaron Jones. Tough to sit him. Against the Bears, impossible to sit him for me. You have to start him, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, didn't the last time they played the Bears, wasn't he like running for 10 yards every time he touched the ball, like 10 or more yards every time he touched the ball? He's looked great this year. You got to start him in this matchup.
And then now, just as we were ready to drop him off the map completely, A.J. Dillon has come back to life, and now he gets to the Bears too. What are you reading into this performance the past week? It looked like what we had expected all along from A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, I'm not going too crazy about him. I mean, he still only had 8 carries. He did have 3 catches, but I mean, he's still not getting like tons of volume. He found the end zone, so that was nice. And he could find the end zone again because, again, it's the Bears. It's a terrible run defense. But I can only put him in that start him if you need him category.
Yeah, again, he's kind of there with the Gus Edwards, Latavius Murray types, but I will just say this. I know this is a couple of ifs, but if Justin Fields is out again, and if Aaron Rodgers is out again, we could see the Packers run the ball a ton against this Bears, run defense that's been pretty poor. Maybe A.J. Dillon has a lot more intrigue than we're going to give him credit for, but again, not going to put him in the top 20 or anything like that. And then the other side, it's still going to be all David Montgomery. Didn't quite smash last week, but had some good numbers, a lot of usage, which is encouraging. It is a soft Packers run defense. How do you put Monty?
This week he's almost a must start. I mean, even if you don't look at what Jalen Hurts did to this Packers defense, look what Miles Sanders did. This defense is terrible against the run, terrible at tackling. This should be a big David Montgomery game. You got to start him.
Yeah, I definitely feel good about him. And again, if those 2 quarterbacks are sitting, you feel even better about him because I think it's going to be a battle of the running backs. But yeah, you've got to love Monty this week. Super high floor. I think he's a must start if you can get him in your lineup. Jaguars at the Lions. Look, Travis Etienne said he's good to go. Doug Peterson said he's good to go. If he plays, you're starting him. Now, on the Lions side, here we go again. Jamal Williams still leading the league in rushing touchdowns. How do you treat him against the Jags?
I mean, against the Jags, I think he's a good start this week because we know he'll get goal line chances, opportunities to score. And against the Jags, those should be there for him. So this week, he's a good start.
Yeah, strong start. I mean, it's pretty clear he always has touchdown upside every single week. This matchup definitely sounds like he will. And Lions are at home. They seem to play better there offensively. I really like Jamal Williams. But again, mid-range RB2 because he's just not a pass catcher and he's not exactly ripping off these huge runs or anything. And then there's DeAndre Swift. What do you think?
Spoiler alert. Check back for a video later this week. But I really like DeAndre Swift. I'm starting him if I got him.
Okay, this is the week you think? Let's see. Like a lot of people really hope so. Yeah, this matchup, I think you've got to have a little more trust in him. I like the fact he was used a little bit more. Justin Jackson was used a little bit less last week. So I'm still nervous, but I'll treat him as an RB2, and I think he's a good start. Browns taking on the Texans. We know it's going to be all about the quarterback in that game. But let's get to the running game. Nick Chubb, no doubts. Kareem Hunt. I mean, does anything change just because they have a new quarterback?
No, I don't think so. And it's a great matchup against the Texans, but you still can't start Kareem Hunt. Maybe with Deshaun Watson, they'll change things. They'll throw it more. He'll be more involved. But, I mean, let me see it first. Not starting Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, crazy. A running back against this Houston defense, a guy who was pretty much an every week start last year, and now we can't even think about putting him in your lineup. You can't. He's just a backup in a handcuff, which is, I don't get it. But I'm not doing it. I'm not starting Kareem Hunt even against the Texans. And then we've had a lot of questions already about Dameon Pierce. A lot of people are nervous, and rightfully so. I think you should be nervous, but do you still start him against this Cleveland defense, which is one of the worst against the run still?
Yeah, that's the only saving grace here if you've got Dameon Pierce. It's such a good matchup, but I mean, I can't put him in the must-start category anymore. It's just too risky, but I'm going to say if you need him, you can start him because of the matchup.
I'll say this. I feel like they're going to need him this game. They're going to use him. Houston, you'd think, would be fired up for this game. I'm going to give him one more shot and say I'm going to start him if I have him, unless he's like my third or fourth running back, of course, and I wouldn't normally start him. I'm going to flex him. I'm going to start him. If he bombs this week, I might be out and just keep him on the bench the rest of the season. But I'm going to give him this week and say I'll start him. Jets at the Vikings. Who's going to be the running back for the Jets? That's a very good question. Michael Carter sprained his ankle last week. Don't know if he'll be ready to go. The backup, you'd think is Ty Johnson, but then there's also the rookie, Zonovan Knight. Let's try to kind of sort through all this. Okay, let's start with Johnson. Looked good, but only got a few carries. Is he the guy you think will get more work if Michael Carter's out?
I don't think so, because he was number 3 in the pecking order. So I'm going to say if Michael Carter is out and James Robinson is out again, I think Ty Johnson is somebody you can start if you need him because the matchup is so good, but not a must start.
Yeah, he's a guy who has ability. Look, with the ball in his hands, he can be explosive, but the problem is that's kind of all he does. He's not great at anything else, so I can't trust him based on the lack of volume. And look, he's been there for a while in New York. He's really just kind of an emergency running back. So I would say no, I'm steering clear. And then I did mention Zonovan Knight on the waiver wire video because look how many touches he got in his first game action. James Robinson, healthy scratch. I'm going to assume that's going to be the same case going forward. And then Carter, again, banged up. Do you think Knight takes the lead role, and do you have interest in him?
I do think he takes the lead role, and I do have interest in him because this is a good matchup. If he's going to get, 14 carries and however many Mike White dump-offs Mike White wants to give him, I'll put him in my lineup. Not a must start, but a good start.
There you go. Yeah, I think he's the back. If there is a back to own in that offense, it is Knight. See what he does. He looks pretty good, and he is a good pass catcher. That was kind of one of the things he did at NC State. Consistency there. So I think he is flex worthy, assuming Carter and Robinson both are sitting. All right, Commanders at the Giants. These two teams are going to match up a couple times in the next couple weeks. And so Brian Robinson, a revival here, a coming out party. I don't know what you want to call it, but are you buying into his career best rookie performance from last week?
I mean, no. If you watch the the shocker video or whatever, I called it a fluke, but I'm gonna say again, it's a good matchup. But look, 2 weeks ago he had the best matchup against Houston and looked terrible. So who knows? But because the matchup is good, the Giants' run defense not good. I'm gonna say if you need him, you can start him, but not a must start.
Yeah, definitely worth rostering again. Definitely somebody who could be starting for you. But again, you only got 2 teams that are on bye this week. Not a lot of injuries there on the running back front. I think he's still just an RB3. It is a good matchup. Look, and I talked about this in the waiver wire video. He is somebody you could definitely consider. Giants are giving up a lot of yards per carry. They're in the bottom 3, I believe. But I'm not going to say you have to start him based just on last week. And then Antonio Gibson, do you think he is now fading back, or you think he's going to kind of even out touches a little bit more this week?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But, I mean, Brian Robinson caught 2 passes, which, when's the last time that happened? I think we see a little bit more Antonio Gibson this week, but still, it can't feel great about him, but it is a good matchup, like I said. So if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, I don't feel as good about Gibson anymore. But again, don't want to overreact to last week because 2 weeks ago it looked like Gibson was taking over the backfield. It's still a timeshare. Gibson is still kind of a desperation flex. Tennessee going to Philadelphia. Should be a tough matchup there. So you got Derrick Henry on one side, and then you got Miles Sanders, who just went off against Green Bay, scored twice, looking great, but now he gets the number one run defense in the NFL. Is this a letdown game?
I think so. I mean, I get it. If you're going to start Miles Sanders, you don't have better options. I get it, but I would want to be able to bench Miles Sanders if possible. Yeah, I mean, pretty much probably has to score a touchdown. And unlike Samaje Perine last week, who had a nice game against Tennessee, that's because Samaje Perine catches a lot of passes. Miles Sanders does not. So, if possible, I'm sitting Miles Sanders.
Completely agree. Again, let's just use short-term memory. Forget what happened last weekend. This is a different team, different matchup. Everything is different. So Sanders against Tennessee, you can't feel great. Not a must sit, but again, if you have somebody with more upside, I think it's okay to keep him on your bench and don't feel guilty about it. Seahawks taking on the Rams. Who would have thought the team with the superior record here at this point of the season would be Seattle, but that's the case. So they're fighting for the playoffs. Rams are just fighting to stay alive, like literally. They're doing it with Cam Akers and Kyron Williams. Let's start with Akers. Any interest?
No, I still can't. He's not catching passes. Only had 8 carries last week. I know it's a good matchup, but he needs a touchdown. And how is he going to score a touchdown with this offense? I don't see it. So I can't start Cam Akers.
No, can't start Cam Akers. Just because he's technically the leading rusher, it really doesn't mean anything when the team is this bad. Then Kyron Williams, I mean, he's a guy who's getting involved more, and he is the pass-catching back. But still, again, this offense, I can't do it.
No, can't do it. Again, it's a great matchup. You wish you could, but you just can't. Cannot start Kyron Williams.
Dolphins taking on the Niners. Look, I know a lot of us were expecting Jeff Wilson to just dominate last week. He didn't do that. Do you think going on the road against his former team in San Francisco that he's startable?
I mean, startable, yes, because we know he's going to get, the work. But, man, this is a way tougher matchup than last week. I mean, maybe he's just so motivated that he runs great. But, I mean, that's not enough for me to trust him. So I can only put Jeff Wilson in the start him if you need him category this week.
Yeah, definitely got to drop him down. Again, you don't want to get too carried away with the matchups. But, again, going from a team that was the worst run defense, San Francisco has the second toughest run defense behind Tennessee. You can flex him. You could use him, but I definitely don't want to if I don't have to. And then Raheem Mostert missed last week. Not sure if he'll come back. If he does, is he playable?
Not in this matchup. No, not starting Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, and of course, ironically, also against his former team. We know all the connections there, but Mostert, even if he's deemed healthy, can't do it. Chiefs taking on the Bengals should be a good game. I wonder how much Isaiah Pacheco can do. He's been looking really good on the ground, but definitely a tough matchup here. How do you feel?
I mean, look, he had a tough matchup last week. I said don't start him, and he came through. He's getting involved. He always has a chance to score. It's another tough matchup, so I'll put him in the if you need him, you can start him category.
Yeah, I still can't feel great about him. You got to think that this will be more of a battle of the quarterbacks. He's always startable, but I can't put him more than kind of a high-end RB3. And then on the other side, Samaje Perine? Well, maybe he's still the guy. We don't know for sure if Joe Mixon will be cleared. So if Mixon does play, assuming we have no interest in Perine. If Mixon doesn't play, how do you treat Perine?
I think this week Perine is a must start. I mean, he did great against Tennessee. It looks great in the passing game. This is not a very good run defense. This should be an absolute shootout with lots of points on the board. I think if Mixon is out, you're starting Perine.
Yeah, well, what makes him really interesting, assuming you're in a PPR format, look, at one point during the game last week, he had as many targets as he did rushes. This is a guy who's used basically as a pass catcher. He was getting more targets than Tyler Boyd was. All right, don't get you started on Boyd, but still, Perine is going to have value, especially if the Chiefs putting up points and they have to come back. So, yeah, I feel like Perine is a solid start this week, only if Mixon doesn't play them. And then in the Colts-Cowboys matchup, let's talk about the two-headed monster here. Tony Pollard, kind of disappointed when Zeke came back last week. Does he bounce back against Indy?
I mean, it's not as good of a matchup, but we know this guy always can take one play to the house. So And he did get, 18 carries and 2 catches last week. So he was still heavily involved. But I can't put him more than like, an if you need him, you can start him kind of guy, because now Zeke's back there to take carries away. So if you need him, you can start Pollard.
Same thing. I mean, as long as Zeke's there to cut into his touches, you can't say you have to start him. But it's also not somebody that you have to bench. He's always got upside. So again, kind of that flex range for me. Zeke looked really good last week. Are you buying into that?
No, not buying into that, but Zeke is who he is for me at this point. Can always score, gets a decent amount of volume. If you need him, you can start him.
I agree. I pretty much have these two running backs kind of neck and neck. Zeke has that touchdown upside, will be used more in the red zone. Pollard is the guy who can make those big plays and catch passes. Different attributes, but both pretty similar value. And then week 13 ends with the Saints at the Bucs. Look, Alvin Kamara, he doesn't look startable these days. Does anything change now against Tampa?
No, this is another tough run defense. Look, if it wasn't for that overtime, 1-yard touchdown run by Nick Chubb, they would have done a great job against Nick Chubb last week. So now we're talking about Alvin Kamara? No way am I starting Alvin Kamara. Must sit this week.
Yep, he's going on a streak now of just bad fantasy games. And this is another bad matchup. Look, you should be sitting Kamara unless you really are hurting in terms of running back depth. And then on the other side, let's hope it's just all Rachaad White next week. But look, Leonard Fournette might come back. Let's talk about either scenario. If Leonard Fournette is out, I assume Rachaad White is a must start.
Yeah, if Leonard Fournette's out, you got to roll with Rachaad White again.
All right, and then if Lenny does come back, how do you feel about him?
Then I'll say he's more like a start him if you need him kind of guy, because I do worry, I do believe that Rachaad White will be the lead back, but this might be like a 55-45, might even be like a 50-50. So if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, the matchup was great last week, and it was all his backfield, and he didn't disappoint. But again, this matchup, look, Saints are not a great run defense, but they're just not as bad as Cleveland. And if he's, not seeing as many touches, he's kind of in that RB3 range. High-end RB3, but still not a must-start. And then Leonard Fournette, if he plays, is he a guy you trust in fantasy lineups?
Barely. I'm just going to put him in that if you need him, you can start him category, but you can't be feeling good right now because you just can't think Leonard Fournette coming off a hip pointer injury, after what Rachaad White's done the last 2 weeks, is just going to go out there and dominate the touches. Best case for Leonard Fournette, he gets half the touches. Only if you need him, you can start him.
And this backfield feels a lot to me like the Dallas situation we just talked about, a little sort of lightning and thunder almost situation. Fournette will still get goal line work. He'll still get catches, and that's why he's so hard to say you have to sit him. So look, if Fournette plays, he is playable, but again, RB3 range. All right, that's our take on all the running backs that matter for Week 13. Don't forget, we have start-sit advice for every other position, trade advice, waiver wire advice, everything you need to help you win in fantasy right here on this playlist. Everything you need to help win in Week 13 and beyond.